Imagine discovering a historical letter written by none other than Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, who ordered the crucifixion of Jesus. How would you react to knowing that he deeply regretted his role in the death of Christ? More than that, Pilate sent a letter to the Roman Emperor Tiberius detailing not only the trial and crucifixion of Jesus, but also something astonishing: his resurrection. In this account, Pilate describes Jesus' physical appearance, revealing details not found in the Gospels. This video brings this discovery to light, sharing the content of that letter and what it says about Jesus. I invite you to watch closely and draw your own conclusions about what Pilate told the emperor regarding the Son of God. Stay until the end to uncover one of the most intriguing descriptions of Jesus, a rare portrayal full of details. But before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and activate the notification bell so you'll be alerted about our upcoming videos. Now, let's turn to the letter. The letter opens with a formal greeting from Pontius Pilate to Tiberius Caesar. Pilate recounts the appearance of an extraordinary man in his time, a man of unparalleled virtue named Jesus Christ, who still walked among them and was widely recognized as a prophet of truth. Yet his own disciples called him the Son of God, as they believed he could do the impossible: raise the dead and heal all manner of illnesses. Imagine the impact of these words on Tiberius, a Roman governor under his jurisdiction, bearing witness to a man with such extraordinary powers whose presence left a deep impression on those who encountered him. Pilate mentions that despite being admired by many, Jesus aroused envy among religious leaders, which led to the tragic events that resulted in his trial and crucifixion. At this point, the description becomes fascinating. Pilate describes Jesus' physical appearance in detail, as if wanting to immortalize his image so that anyone reading could recognize him if they ever saw him or heard other accounts. Jesus is described as a tall man, commanding presence with a countenance that inspired both love and awe. His features were unique, and anyone who looked upon him felt an almost reverent respect. The description continues, revealing that Jesus' hair was the color of ripe chestnut, falling naturally to his shoulders. Not content with just these details, Pilate notes that at the top of Jesus' head there was a natural part in his hair, resembling the style of the Nazarene, which adds a distinct and culturally significant element to his image. According to Pilate, Jesus' forehead was flat and very delicate, reflecting an uncommon gentleness. His face, surprisingly, bore no blemishes or wrinkles, as if his skin was somehow protected from imperfections, and the slight blush that graced his features made his appearance even more harmonious. With an attentive eye, Pilate describes Jesus' nose and mouth, noting that they were perfectly proportionate and shaped in a way that nothing could be criticized. He mentions Jesus' beard, thick and matching the tone of his hair, slightly parted and not overly long. These details were important so that readers of that time could have a clear image in mind, one that would endure over time and be recognizable to anyone who might have the chance to see him. But it is in the eyes that Pilate truly immerses us in a unique description. He says that Jesus' eyes were gray, clear, and bright with an intensity that seemed to reach the depths of each person he looked upon. These eyes had an innate ability to reproach without needing words, simply with a glance. It was as if Jesus' eyes held ancient wisdom capable of conveying calmness and firmness. At the same time, Pilate notes that though extremely compassionate, Jesus had a noble bearing that conveyed maturity and respect. Jesus, according to Pilate, was a serious man, yet at the same time gentle and approachable, and his words were seasoned with wisdom. He was not one to laugh often, but he frequently wept, reinforcing the image of a deeply sensitive man concerned for those around him. The letter continues as Pilate delves even deeper into the character and personality of Jesus. He describes Jesus as a man whose singular beauty set him apart from all others. He seemed to surpass all men in grace and appearance. Pilate notes that his hands and arms were especially pleasing to behold, details that further enhance the image of a serene and compassionate figure whose very presence inspired respect and admiration in those who observed him. As Pilate narrates his experience with Jesus, was marked by his reserved yet profoundly eloquent demeanor. When questioned about his religious beliefs, Jesus responded with calmness. Without hesitation, he told Pilate, "I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world." These words, mysterious and full of meaning, must have had a significant impact on the governor, making it clear he was in the presence of someone whose convictions transcended the physical realm and earthly powers. Pilate, impressed by Jesus' firmness and humility, decided to question him about his divine identity. He asked if he was a god, to which Jesus replied with wisdom and simplicity, "You say that I am, for I am the truth." And the life, this profound response echoed in Pilate's mind as he realized that Jesus was no ordinary man. He was someone with an uncommon understanding and vision of the world. However, the political situation and the growing tension between the Jewish people and the Romans put Pilate in a delicate position. He writes in the letter that the unrest in the city intensified and the pressure from the religious leaders for Jesus' condemnation only increased. Though reluctant, Pilate felt that he would have to yield to the pressure to prevent an uprising in Jerusalem. He mentions that in ordering Jesus' crucifixion, he sought to ensure peace and stability in the city. Then, upon giving the command for the crucifixion, something extraordinary happened. The sky darkened, the sun ceased to shine, and stars appeared in the middle of the day, as if nature itself were reacting to the injustice. Pilate mentions in the letter that at that moment he felt an immense weight on his conscience and rushed to wash his hands, symbolizing his desire not to be responsible for the blood of a just man. Pilate's act of washing his hands became a symbol throughout history, representing his attempt to distance himself from the condemnation of an innocent. Yet he knew that this gesture could not erase what had been done. Pilate describes the crucifixion as a moment when the world seemed to stop, and even the dead in their tombs were reportedly seen as if they had risen. What he witnessed that day was unprecedented. He concludes this part of the account by explaining that although he had fulfilled his political responsibility, something inside him was forever changed. The memory of Jesus, his gaze, his calm demeanor, and his message of love and justice would continue to haunt him. And here we arrive at one of the most intriguing points in the letter. Pilate's description of Jesus was extremely detailed and revealing. In an era without photography or portraits, Pilate's account allowed any reader of that time to visualize Jesus' unique figure as if standing before him. What's most striking is the fact that this description comes from someone who in theory had no personal reason to go into such detail, except for the admiration and impact that Jesus left upon him. Now Pilate turns to recount the days that followed the crucifixion. He mentions that rumors began circulating in Jerusalem, rumors that Jesus had risen. This reached Pilate's ears, who, intrigued and somewhat concerned, sent soldiers to investigate the tomb. But the tomb was empty. The rumors claimed that Jesus had appeared to several people, including his disciples, and that he had ascended to heaven. Pilate notes that upon hearing this, he felt a mix of fear and curiosity, as he had never witnessed or heard of anything like it before. As the letter continues, Pilate expressed his conflicted feelings. He knew that Jesus was not an ordinary man, but a being whose words and actions transcended human understanding. The impact of his brief encounters with Jesus transformed Pilate's worldview, and he concludes the letter by suggesting that the story he witnessed in Jerusalem might forever alter the course of humanity. After recounting these extraordinary events, Pilate turns to describe the political situation and the increasing tension he felt while governing Judea. He admits that Jerusalem was one of the most challenging cities to control, and given the turbulent nature of its people, he constantly feared a revolt. He shares that his predecessor Valerius Graius had also faced many difficulties and warned Pilate about the unpredictable character of Jerusalem's inhabitants, lacking a sufficient number of soldiers and with minimal assistance from the Roman government. Pilate found himself in a precarious position. He reflects that the unchecked expansion of the Roman Empire could ultimately be its downfall, as the conquered territory exceeded the military's ability to defend and control it. This lack of resources, coupled with growing public pressure, created a situation in which Pilate felt cornered, forced to make difficult decisions, including the one that led to Jesus' crucifixion. At one point in the letter, Pilate recounts a significant moment when he first heard about Jesus, a young man with an almost angelic appearance who preached a new teaching in the name of the gods who had sent him. He admits that he initially feared Jesus might incite the people against the Romans, but soon realized that his words carried a message of peace and reconciliation. This surprised Pilate, as he noticed that Jesus seemed more a friend to the Romans than to the Jewish people, which made him feel less threatened. One day, while passing by the pool of Siloam, Pilate saw a crowd gathered, and in the midst of them a calm man, leaning against a tree, speaking softly. When he asked who it was, he was told that it was Jesus. Pilate describes the scene as unforgettable. The contrast between Jesus with his fair skin and golden hair and the people around him who had darker complexions was striking. Pilate claims he had never seen someone with such a serene and gentle expression as Jesus, whose presence seemed to radiate an indescribable peace. This description, which Pilate gives with such precision, is possibly the only documented account of Jesus' appearance outside the Gospels. He mentions that Jesus' golden hair and beard gave him an almost celestial aspect. This detail has intrigued scholars over the years, as it raises questions about the accuracy of this description. Could Jesus have truly possessed these characteristics, or might it be an addition made later by those who copied the letter? Regardless of these doubts, Pilate records this almost mystical vision of Jesus, a man who appeared to be about 30 years old, whose features were so different from his contemporaries that he seemed to belong to another world. He reinforces this image of Jesus as a unique figure possessing a spiritual beauty that transcends any other description. Returning to the account, Pilate mentions that though he was tempted to approach Jesus and speak with him, he refrained from interrupting the moment. Instead, he instructed his secretary Manuscripts to join the crowd and listen to what Jesus was saying. Manuscripts, a trusted confidant of Pilate and fluent in Hebrew, returned to the praetorium to report Jesus' words. According to Manuscripts, he had never heard anything so profound and wise, not even in the works of Rome's most respected philosophers. One example Manuscripts shared with Pilate was Jesus' response to a Jewish rebel who asked whether it was right to pay tribute to Caesar. Jesus replied, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." These words, while carrying political wisdom, revealed a sense of justice that moved Pilate. He saw in Jesus a man who, despite his popularity, was neither a revolutionary nor a threat to the Roman Empire. Due to Jesus' wisdom and calm demeanor, Pilate decided to grant him freedom to teach and gather disciples without any restrictions from the Roman government. He believed that by allowing Jesus to follow his path, he was promoting peace and preventing conflict. However, this decision caused outrage among the religious leaders of the time, who saw Jesus as a threat to their own authority. Pilate recounts that complaints against Jesus became frequent in the praetorium. The religious leaders could not tolerate his freedom and growing popularity and threatened to appeal directly to Caesar if Pilate did not take action. Despite this pressure, Pilate stood firm in his decision, as he saw no reason to imprison Jesus. He believed that exiling or accusing him without justification would be contrary to the principles of justice that the Romans upheld. Nevertheless, Pilate explains that the tension in Jerusalem continued to rise, and realizing that an insurrection was imminent, he took an extreme measure to restore peace, even if it meant yielding to the pressures of the religious leaders. He felt that he could not allow a conflict to escalate in his province, and thus finally decided to condemn Jesus, not because he found guilt in him, but to avoid a greater crisis. Pilate goes on in the letter to describe his final decision and its consequences for himself and Jerusalem. He acknowledges that despite his role as Roman governor, his authority had been constrained by circumstances, and that the pressure from religious leaders and the people had led him to do something that deep down he knew was unjust. Pilate reveals that he felt like a powerless spectator in the midst of Jesus' trial, while the religious leaders insisted that Jesus was a threat to Judaism and the Jewish people. Even so, he attempted one last alternative by offering the crowd a choice between Jesus and a well-known prisoner, Barabbas. His intention was for the crowd to choose to free Jesus. To his surprise and dismay, the people chose to save Barabbas, a criminal, and condemn Jesus. Witnessing this choice, Pilate understood that something deeper was at play, something he might never fully comprehend at that moment. He decided to publicly wash his hands, a symbolic gesture indicating that the decision to condemn Jesus to crucifixion was not entirely his own. However, he knew that the moral responsibility of that action would haunt him. Pilate mentions that upon giving the final order for the crucifixion, he felt an overwhelming weight, as if he were breaking with something greater than himself. The memory of Jesus' gaze's calmness before the furious crowd remained vivid in his mind. Soon after the execution, mysterious and inexplicable events occurred. According to Pilate, he reports that a deep darkness covered the city at noon, something he had never witnessed before. The sun vanished from the sky, stars appeared in the middle of the day, and the moon seemed tinged with blood. This darkness terrified the population, creating an atmosphere of supernatural unease. Pilate notes that some of the dead were seen emerging from their tombs and walking among the living. These signs seemed to indicate that the entire world was responding to Jesus' death. These events profoundly shook Pilate, who felt a heavy guilt settle into his conscience. He realized that washing his hands would not be enough to free him from the burden of what he had done. Pilate mentions in the letter that the impact of Jesus' crucifixion was so great that it seemed to have changed the course of history, and he believed that those events would be remembered for generations. Even without fully understanding Jesus' mission, he sensed that the meaning of his death went beyond any human comprehension. The letter then transitions into a personal reflection by Pilate on his own life. In his role in governing Jerusalem, he reveals that after the crucifixion, the city seemed clad in a strange melancholy, and rumors about Jesus' resurrection began circulating among the population. Some claimed that Jesus had appeared to his followers, while others insisted that he was seen by many before ascending to the heavens. Pilate, skeptical yet intrigued, could not ignore these stories. To try to understand what had truly happened, he ordered soldiers to go to Jesus' tomb, where, according to the reports, he had been buried. However, the tomb was empty. The soldiers reported that the stone sealing the tomb had been moved and Jesus' body was no longer there. This mystery led Pilate to question deeply, for he knew there was no logical explanation for the disappearance of the body. At the end of his letter, Pilate expresses a mixture of regret and fascination. He realized that Jesus was an incomparable figure, and that in some way his brief time in Jerusalem had left an indelible mark on everyone who encountered him, including Pilate himself. Pilate admits that looking back, his life had been transformed by his brief encounter with Jesus, and that he would never be the same again. Pilate's testimony then ends with a confession that although he had fulfilled his duty as governor, something in his heart had changed forever. He sensed that perhaps he had stood before someone extraordinary, a being whose myth transcended any earthly power. With this awareness, he concludes his letter to Tiberius, suggesting that what happened in Jerusalem would not be forgotten, and that over time, even the Roman Empire might come to recognize the significance of Jesus. This testimony about the resurrection and the potential immortality of Jesus' message illustrates the profound impact he had even on his adversaries. Pilate's letter thus becomes evidence not only of Jesus' existence, but also that in his essence he was far more than a man. In closing his letter to Tiberius, Pilate refers to a curious artifact that would in a way secure his place in history, the Pilate stone. This artifact was discovered centuries later near the theater of Caesarea Maritima, in the region where Pilate governed. It is an inscription in stone mentioning his name, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judah, dedicating the space to Emperor Tiberius. Although the artifact was found long after his time, it stands as concrete archaeological evidence of Pilate's presence in that region, connecting history with reality. Returning to the central theme, Pilate reflects that his testimony about Jesus might one day be questioned or ignored by the powers of Rome. He expresses his feeling of having been a witness to something beyond his own understanding, something he himself could not control. The letter becomes an appeal to Tiberius not to seek explanations, but to recognize that the events in Jerusalem were unique and perhaps worthy of being preserved in memory. Over the centuries, this letter, along with the Pilate stone, has become an object of study and reflection for those seeking historical evidence about Jesus. The details of Jesus' appearance described by Pilate have been passed down through generations as a rare representation of what he looked like. His golden hair, piercing eyes, and majestic posture, combined with his humility and wisdom, are traits still recognized and revered today. The letter concludes with Pilate's reflective note on the impact of his decision he suggests to Tiberius that the rumors of resurrection and the stories about Jesus should not be dismissed as they seem to carry a deeper hurt truth. Pilate knew that the story of Jesus' crucifixion would not vanish, and that this simple man condemned to prevent an uprising was destined for a much greater role. With this final thought, he seals his narrative as if sensing that his own life was forever marked by Jesus' presence in his path. Thus the Pilate stone and the letter are far more than mere historical relics. They are testimonies that Jesus truly lived and left an indelible impression not only on those who followed him, but also on those who directly or indirectly participated in his trial. Today, knowing the contents of this letter, we can understand how a Roman governor faced with an ethical and political dilemma became one of the first to recognize the depth and uniqueness of the figure of Jesus Christ. Leave your thoughts on the video's topic in the comments always. Respecting others' opinions, I hope you enjoyed the video. It takes a lot of work to create, and all information is carefully selected. All I ask in return is for your support with a like, and don't forget to activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Share this video with someone who is also on this journey of faith. Now feel free to click on the video appearing on your screen and continue your journey in the search for salvation. Thank you for being here, and may God bless you.